On the morning of December 16, 1944, in the town of Monschau, Germany, the icy ground shook violently under the roar of yet another barrage from American guns passing high above. Yet this dawn brought an unsettling novelty, a horror that seemed utterly beyond reason. Rather than slamming into the soil or splintering against the woods, the projectiles burst apart while still airborne, right over the heads of the pushing forward German lines, unleashing a deadly shower of metal shards impervious to the shelter of any dugout. Within the ranks of the 326th Volksgrenadier Division, as they pressed against the defenses held by the 38th Cavalry Squadron, hardened troops who had endured countless battles on the Eastern Front now faced a phenomenon that shattered their grasp of combat realities. This was no familiar barrage with its foreseeable strikes, reliable cover areas, or the reliable shield offered by fortifications. It represented destruction raining down from the skies, executed with unerring accuracy. In that instant, Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson, from the 406th Artillery Group, had taken one of the Battle of the Bulge's most pivotal unsanctioned choices. Defying explicit directives and lacking approval from superiors, he directed his artillery crews to arm their projectiles with the Allies' most tightly protected innovation, proximity fuses. These ingenious mechanisms, fitted with tiny radar units capable of gauging proximity to objectives and triggering explosions at the ideal altitude, stood to amplify the destructive power of shelling by a staggering multiple of 50. The grim calculus of mortality was on the verge of transformation amid the icy woodlands of the Ardennes. Unbeknownst to the German troops, they had stumbled upon an invention of such groundbreaking impact that it would reshape not only the outcome of this clash, but the fundamental essence of combat forever. The onslaught erupted. The German offensive, known as Watch am Rhein, or Watch on the Rhine, opened with great optimism for the Wehrmacht's prospects. In what amounted to Adolf Hitler's final desperate throw of the dice, the assault mobilized 200,000 troops from the German army, along with 1,000 armored vehicles and close to 2,000 heavy guns, all concealed with remarkable stealth amid the misty forests of the Ardennes. The Nazi leader had confidently promised his commanders that the push would divide the enemy forces in two, seize back the vital port of Antwerp, and reverse the momentum of a conflict that was steadily drifting toward total collapse for Germany. At precisely 05:30, on December 16th, the opening barrage delivered utter shock to the defenders, catching them entirely off guard. Along the sprawling 85-mile line of attack, Wehrmacht cannons unleashed a furious storm of 1,600 shells every minute. On the American side, reconnaissance efforts had collapsed in utter disarray, overlooking the enormous troop concentrations entirely. As a result, the troops holding the forward positions consisted largely of inexperienced newcomers or battle-weary survivors who had been rotated to this seemingly peaceful stretch for recovery. Yet in the town of Monschau, Colonel Axelson confronted a dire and untenable battlefield dilemma. The 38th Cavalry Squadron, serving as a compact reconnaissance outfit, found itself vastly outnumbered by advancing German troops. Standard artillery barrages proved utterly ineffective against the onslaught. In a moment of dire necessity, Axelson reached his pivotal choice. He ordered the unleashing of the classified proximity-fused munitions, bypassing all official permissions. This bold move would eventually expose him to the risk of a military tribunal. Yet, at that critical juncture, He understood that strict adherence to protocol spelled inevitable loss. The impact struck swiftly and with catastrophic force. Advancing German infantry, arrayed in their customary attack patterns, were abruptly assailed by an unfamiliar barrage. Bursting at altitudes of 30 to 50 feet overhead, the projectiles unleashed inverted cones of shrapnel that blanketed far wider swaths of ground compared to typical surface detonating rounds. Seasoned fighters, well-versed in dodging routine shelling by hunkering in foxholes, crouching behind trunks, or diving into gullies for protection, were mercilessly shredded in their hiding spots. The hidden ingenuity of destruction. This remarkable invention embodied the pinnacle of American ingenuity in science and manufacturing prowess. In contrast to traditional projectiles that demanded a precise hit or relied on timing mechanisms prone to exploding at incorrect altitudes, the proximity fuse incorporated a compact radar unit, roughly the size of a coffee can, operating independently. Within every such device, U.S. engineers crammed 130 electronic parts, among them 4 or 5 small vacuum tubes, varying by version, that endured the astonishing 20,000 Tubantron acceleration generated by launch from a cannon. The underlying principles of physics were nothing short of breathtaking. Upon discharge, the intense forces shattered a fragile glass vial filled with electrolyte, thereby generating a battery to energize the minuscule radar throughout the projectile's trajectory. Leading this effort with the fervor of the Manhattan Project was Dr. Merle Tuve from the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. In Silver Spring, Maryland, a secretive facility masquerading as a derelict used car lot drew in 3% of the nation's physicists during its height of operations. The level of protection there rivaled the safeguards surrounding the atomic bomb initiative. Employees were forbidden from sharing details of their assignments with loved ones, while every single fuse bore a distinct serial number to enable precise monitoring. At first, the engineering hurdles appeared utterly impossible to overcome. Standard vacuum tubes, originally built for household radios, required a total overhaul to endure the violent launch from artillery pieces. These components needed to operate reliably amid furious spins at dizzying velocities, perform consistently across diverse environmental extremes, and possess the precision to identify objectives without triggering too soon. The pivotal advancement arose from innovative scaling-down methods that would eventually transform the field of electronics. The designs crafted by Dr. James Van Allen shrank to the dimensions of pencil erasers, but still incorporated every essential feature found in traditional radio vacuum tubes. Come December 1944, U.S. manufacturing plants were churning out 40,000 proximity fuses each day. More than 100 firms lent their expertise to the project, including giants like RCA and General Electric, alongside Sylvania and Crossley Corporation. The initiative's total expenditure climbed to $1 billion in 1940s currency, making it the runner-up only to the Manhattan Project among World War II expenditures. The incident involving Axelson's unapproved deployment of the proximity fuse on December 16th sparked an urgent crisis in the chain of command. By disregarding explicit instructions that limited these devices to anti-aircraft roles, driven by concerns over the Germans potentially reverse-engineering seized samples, he had crossed a critical line. Yet the fuse's overwhelming success near Monschau could not be ignored. It had halted the German offensive in its tracks, inflicting losses that stunned forces on both sides. News of this breakthrough quickly made its way to the highest levels of Allied command. With the Ardennes front teetering on the edge of catastrophe, General Eisenhower sought official permission for broader application on December 19th. Just 2 days later, on December 21st, the prohibitions were entirely removed, allowing proximity fuses to be employed freely in ground engagements throughout the Bulge theater. The swift rollout that ensued highlighted the unmatched efficiency of American supply lines. In a matter of days, shells equipped with these fuses reached artillery formations all across the Ardennes. As the German encirclement tightened around Bastogne, the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion obtained its share of the munitions. Meanwhile, the 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion, operating M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers, integrated them into defenses along the northwestern flanks. Farther to the southwest of Bastogne, the 969th Field Artillery Battalion, an African-American outfit led by Lieutenant Colonel Hubert D. Barnes, unleashed them to lethal advantage. Every one of these outfits learned the same lesson. The proximity fuse elevated artillery from a mere auxiliary role to a game-changing force on the field. Spotters could dispense with the painstaking fine-tuning of barrages, as the fuses themselves detected the ideal burst height. Demands on precision firing dropped sharply, even as the weapon's destructive power surged dramatically. Bastogne, encircled yet unyielding. The encirclement at Bastogne offered an ideal showcase for the role of proximity fuses in defensive combat operations. The 101st Airborne Division, fully cut off and facing overwhelming odds, defended the crucial road junction against relentless German offensives. Among their key artillery units was the 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, armed with 75 mm PAK howitzers designed to launch shells equipped with proximity fuses. From December 19th through 31st, the battalion unleashed precisely 7,676 rounds, as documented in official unit logs. Although supplies of proximity-fused ammunition were scarce, limiting their use, the ones deployed inflicted profound mental and material damage on the enemy. Advancing German units disintegrated beneath the explosive airbursts, wiping out whole platoons in mere moments. This was vividly illustrated in the assault on December 22nd, which came right after General McAuliffe's legendary "nuts" response to the Germans' call for surrender. Advancing across open, snow-blanketed terrain in conventional infantry lines, the German troops found themselves fully exposed to the barrage. Proximity-fused projectiles exploded in the sky above with impeccable synchronization, generating interlocking fields of devastation that eliminated any potential havens. The 969th Artillery Battalion, composed entirely of African-American soldiers, fulfilled a vital function in this effort. By deploying their 155 mm howitzers, they established an unbreachable barrier of fatality encircling Bastogne's defenses, which proved impossible for German troops to penetrate. These bigger rounds, bursting at an altitude of 50 feet, scattered deadly shrapnel across expansive regions. Captured Germans subsequently described how assault groups frequently disintegrated well short of U.S. positions, as troops panicked and scattered in the face of those baffling overhead detonations. The massacre at the Sauer River. One of the best recorded instances of the proximity fuse's deadly effectiveness took place along the Sauer River close to Echternach between December 25th and 26th. General George S. Patton, leading the Third Army in its northward push to rescue Bastogne, observed the action firsthand and detailed it in his book, War as I Knew It. An enemy infantry unit endeavored to ford the river, which was only partly iced over, convinced that the cover of night and mist shielded them from detection by Allied spotters. Conventional barrages would have demanded meticulous calibration of the guns, allowing the attackers sufficient opportunity to finish their traversal or find shelter. In contrast, the proximity-fused rounds required no such fine-tuning. As Patton recounted, we caught a German battalion crossing the Sauer. The new posit ammunition was devastating. The shells burst in the air above them. They had nowhere to run. The river behind them, our fire in front and above. When the firing stopped, we counted 702 bodies. That tally of 702 fatalities, verified through direct enumeration, stands as one of the rare exact records of losses inflicted by proximity fuse usage. The sheer calculable potency was undeniable. An entire battalion vanished in mere moments, offering neither avenue for retreat nor means of protection. The mental toll rippled across German formations in the area, prompting troops to defy commands for any further attempts to navigate the waterway. The nature of combat in wooded areas underwent a profound shift. What the Germans had relied upon, the thick canopy of the Ardennes for hiding their positions, turned into fatal ambushes once proximity fuses came into play. Even in exposed fields, such a fuse exploding at an altitude of 30 to 50 feet proved sufficiently destructive. Yet amid the trees, its impact intensified dramatically. The overhead detonations splintered limbs from the foliage, generating countless extra wooden fragments as makeshift shrapnel. These jagged pieces, reaching lengths comparable to a person's forearm, hurtled forward at speeds of hundreds of feet per second, inflicting devastating wounds. Conventional shelters, such as hunkering down against sturdy trunks or excavating pits beneath root networks, lost all value. Assaulted from the sky, the debris and shards rendered obsolete long-held strategies for battling in timbered terrain. U.S. artillery crews swiftly grasped the amplified power of this phenomenon. One proximity-fused 150 mm projectile exploding high over the treetops had the power to wipe out every form of life across a space roughly equivalent to a tennis court. The lethal mix of shrapnel from the casing and jagged wood shards ripped from the foliage formed a full-circle zone of death that rendered even the sharpest battlefield maneuvers futile. Troops from Germany, schooled in the arts of woodland combat, discovered their specialized knowledge utterly ineffective. Dispersing forces to minimize clustered losses only exposed them further to the expansive blast radius. Clustering in tight formations for collective defense, on the other hand, left whole platoons open to annihilation from just one round. Against this innovative peril, no sound military strategy existed. Technical supremacy in action. The proximity fuse relied on mechanisms that struck 1940s combatants as straight out of speculative fiction. Inside every such device sat a compact radio broadcaster tuned to frequencies between 180 and 220 MHz, emitting pulses non-stop that bounced back from nearby surfaces, whether soil, foliage, machinery, or people. With the projectile drawing nearer to its objective, these returning echoes grew more robust. Upon hitting a set threshold of power, aligned with the ideal altitude for explosion, a circuit activated to set off the charge. All components were engineered to endure extremes that would obliterate standard electrical gear. At launch, The forces of acceleration spiked to 20,000 times the pull of gravity on Earth, sufficient to flatten a person's frame into infinitesimal fragments. Rotational speeds generated enormous outward pressures from spinning. Heat levels varied wildly, from the scorching 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit inside the cannon tube to frigid temperatures below freezing at the arc's highest point. Despite their fragility, the vacuum tubes, safeguarded by advanced padding mechanisms, endured the rigors of combat and operated successfully in more than 80% of cases. Rigorous experiments conducted at the Ardennes Proving Ground had pinpointed the most effective detonation altitudes. When used with 105 mm howitzers, the typical artillery for divisions, a height of 30 feet emerged as the sweet spot. For 155 mm cannons, peak destructive power came at 50 feet. The uncommon 240 mm projectiles unleashed catastrophic damage from elevations exceeding 70 feet, wiping out whole sections of enemy troops across map grids. Such advanced engineering prowess swiftly converted into clear advantages on the front lines. Research indicated that these proximity fuses boosted destructive potential by 5 to 10-fold compared to standard munitions. The zone affected by deadly shrapnel expanded by a multiple of 50. In air defense roles, the gains were strikingly greater. The hit rate against V-1 buzz bombs soared from 17% to 79% in mere weeks after introducing the fuses. German intelligence lapses and bewilderment. The Wehrmacht's oversight concerning proximity fuses turned out to be disastrous. During December 1944, German troops seized a U.S. ammo storage site, seizing around 20,000 rounds equipped with these fuses. This unexpected trove of information ought to have sparked urgent efforts to devise defenses. Rather, upon inspecting the seized devices, Nazi engineers dismissed them as unfeasible. The inclusion of vacuum tubes within an artillery projectile flew in the face of every principle that German engineers held regarding electronics and projectile dynamics. As a result, they surmised that the United States must have employed a type of magnetic sensing technology, or perhaps that the apparent parts served merely as distractions concealing the true inner workings. This misjudgment arose in part from a kind of organizational short-sightedness. In reality, Germany had been at the forefront of proximity fuse innovation prior to the conflict. By 1940, companies like Rheinmetall-Borsig and AEG Berlin had already produced functional prototypes. However, an edict from Hitler, which halted any armaments initiatives that would take longer than 6 months to reach readiness, effectively ended the effort. Consequently, German specialists found it inconceivable that their American counterparts had overcome challenges that they had long since forsaken. The situation grew even more poignant upon reflection of Germany's own engineering prowess. Tests of their electrostatic proximity fuses demonstrated a 95% success rate, relying on variations in electrical capacitance instead of radar principles. If the work had persisted, Germany could potentially have deployed such fuses as early as 1941. In a post-war interrogation, Hermann Göring would confess that these German fuses stood just 3 or 4 months away from full deployment at the conflict's close. Charterswarm, Charterfuhren. The Yuletide debacle. On December 25, 1944, the festive season offered Germans no pause in the fighting. Forces from the Wehrmacht, hoping to exploit the holiday for restocking supplies and regrouping troops, soon realized that proximity-fused shells paid no heed to truces. Cooking stations in the field, columns transporting goods, and zones for gathering units all faced ruthless shelling that needed no spotters up front. Just the 420th Armored Field Artillery Battalion unleashed more than 1,000 projectiles that day alone. The majority featured proximity fuses. Operating their M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers, the battalion unleashed swift and precise barrages that left German formations utterly taken aback. This capacity to strike with precision, absent direct sightings, amid foul conditions or at night, shifted the role of cannon fire from a tool confined to sunny hours into a peril that loomed around the clock. The mental toll proved profound. Troops on the German side had grown accustomed to advancing under inclement skies, safe from Allied planes grounded by the elements and from watchers unable to track their positions. Yet proximity fuses shattered this refuge. Peril now struck without mercy, regardless of the skies above, delivering its blow with scarcely more alert than the fleeting shriek of approaching ordnance. In the shadow of Malmedy, Skorzeny crack unit faced ruin. On December 21st, the hand-picked commandos under SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny launched a bold bid to seize the town. Far from typical fighters, these were exceptional operatives with a record of daring feats, extracting Mussolini from captivity, coming perilously close to snatching Tito, and slipping behind American positions clad in stolen U.S. gear. They embodied the pinnacle of Germany's military prowess, yet they encountered a barrage of proximity-fused shells that turned their clever camouflage into fatal liabilities. Bursting in the air above with eerie accuracy, the munitions seemed almost to sense the disguised intruders beneath them. Though precise death tolls stayed a matter of debate, the assault collapsed in utter disaster, inflicting severe casualties that effectively halted Skorzeny's entire campaign. The mental collapse within these premier SS ranks carried profound weight. Conditioned to embrace notions of Aryan dominance and drilled to perfection, the men confronted utter impotence before U.S. ingenuity. Accounts from those who endured describe some rushing headlong at enemy positions, opting for instant demise over the relentless shelling, a total erosion of order among the Führer's fiercest devotees, a feat of manufacturing prowess. The engineering triumph that birthed those proximity fuses stood as a peerless accomplishment in the era's industrial feats. In the closing months of 1944, specifically by December, more than 100 U.S. firms had shifted their operations entirely toward producing fuses. The Crossley Corporation set aside its refrigerator lines to focus on assembling these fuses instead. Emerson Radio transformed its facilities, moving away from consumer electronics and into the realm of munitions manufacturing. Meanwhile, Sylvania, RCA, and General Electric committed whole plants to supporting this vital initiative. The standards for quality assurance in this effort surpassed all prior benchmarks in large-scale manufacturing. Every one of the 130 parts received its own rigorous examination. Solder connections across the board came under close scrutiny through magnified lenses. Selected batches underwent live firing trials to verify they could withstand the rigors of battlefield use. Standards for discarding flawed items proved uncompromising. Even the tiniest irregularity in a part led to its immediate removal from the line. Amid these demands, a labor force made up largely of women upheld such exacting accuracy, enduring shifts of 12 hours each over 6 days per week. Security measures, designed to limit knowledge on a need-to-know basis, ensured these workers remained unaware of the exact purpose behind their output. The workers understood that the device played a crucial role in supporting the war. Come December 1944, their output had reached a pace of one proximity fuse manufactured every 2 seconds, operating non-stop. The drop in expenses proved extraordinary. Back in 1942, the price tag for a single fuse stood at $732, exceeding what a typical laborer earned in a full year. Yet by the end of 1944, large-scale manufacturing had slashed that figure to just $18 apiece, without compromising standards. Such productivity made it possible to churn out 22 million fuses over the course of the conflict, including 200,000 that saw action solely in the Battle of the Bulge. Patton's arithmetic. General Patton grasped the worth of proximity fuses more profoundly than almost any other leader. As his Third Army pushed forward to lift the siege at Bastogne, he wielded them like a decisive offensive tool. Under him, the artillery chief, Brigadier General Edward Williams, crafted innovative strategies tailored expressly to deploying these fuses. Williams introduced the innovative tactic of time-on-target barrages, employing proximity fuses, coordinating several battalions to unleash their fire at the same moment, and ensuring the projectiles converged as one. The simultaneous explosion of numerous shells equipped with these fuses, bursting at their ideal altitude, unleashed devastation of cataclysmic proportions. To the German troops, this onslaught evoked the somber ringing of a death knell. During the 7 days from December 22nd to 29th, the Third Army under Patton unleashed 50,000 rounds, fitted with proximity fuses. This barrage proved pivotal in shattering the enemy's defenses and carving a path to Bastogne. Patton personally noted, "The funny fuse won the Battle of the Bulge for us." Elsenborn Ridge holds. The engagement at Elsenborn Ridge showcased the pinnacle of proximity fuse performance. In this sector, the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions clung tenaciously to vital ground in the face of assaults from the 6th SS Panzer Army, which featured the formidable 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. Across the period of December 17th through 19th, U.S. artillery units discharged 160,000 projectiles, of which about 40,000 incorporated proximity fuses. Representing just 25% of the total, these specialized rounds were responsible for roughly 60% of the more than 5,000 German losses. The evidence in the numbers was irrefutable. American artillery's effectiveness surged fourfold thanks to proximity fuses. As German forces pressed their assaults time and again along the rugged, tree-covered inclines, they encountered impenetrable barrages of exploding shrapnel from above. Whole platoons vanished in mere moments, with corpses stacking up so densely that later assaults had to scramble across the remains of their fallen comrades. By the end of the 3rd day, the offensives ground to a halt. The crack troops of the Waffen-SS lay shattered, undone by cutting-edge U.S. innovations and the fallout from Operation Bodenplatte. That operation unfolded on January 1st, 1945. When the Luftwaffe unleashed around 900 fighter planes against Allied bases. The raid achieved total shock value, with numerous enemy planes still parked and vulnerable on the tarmac. Yet, as the German aviators headed back, they slammed into relentless sheets of anti-aircraft barrages armed with proximity fuses. Out of the 277 German planes downed that day, 172 succumbed to ground defenses, the majority felled by those fuse-equipped weapons. The sheer efficiency of the destruction left observers on both sides reeling. Aviators from Germany, drilled in, dodging the anticipated paths of flak, now faced munitions that burst exactly at the points of greatest devastation. The Luftwaffe, teetering on collapse already, could not rebound from such devastating tolls. Breaking the secret. In the opening days of January 1945, efforts to keep the technology under wraps proved futile. Countless rounds had been unleashed, and numerous troops had observed the devastating results firsthand. On January 6th, the War Department permitted a controlled release of information. Coverage in the New York Times highlighted an innovative artillery projectile designed to amplify the potency of U.S. weaponry, though it offered no details on the underlying mechanism. By then, German spies had only just begun to comprehend the device's true impact, arriving at that realization far too belatedly. A dispatch dated January 10th from Foreign Armies West declared, "The Americans possess a radio-controlled artillery fuse that detonates shells at optimal height for anti-personnel effect. This weapon has caused severe casualties among our forces in the Ardennes. No effective countermeasures exist." Evaluation of tactical consequences. After the conflict ended, evaluations highlighted the profound role played by proximity fuses in shaping outcomes. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt remarked that the proximity fuse proved to be the turning point. He explained that their offensives faltered not due to the bravery of American forces, despite their strong performance, but rather from shelling that appeared to track targets with uncanny precision. General Hasse von Manteuffel, who led the 5th Panzer Army, shared his observations, noting that U.S. artillery struck fear into the hearts of his men, particularly the innovative projectiles that detonated overhead. These bursts instilled disorder, even in units hardened by years of combat. The numbers underscore this reality. Some 200,000 rounds equipped with proximity fuses were unleashed, leading to roughly 15,000 to 20,000 German deaths, an amount representing as much as 20% of all German fatalities in the engagements. This technology delivered between 5 and 10 times the lethality of standard munitions, all without the need for spotters on the front lines during adverse conditions. The toll on lives. Each figure concealed a profound personal toll. Among the German ranks were young conscripts, often mere adolescents drafted in the closing months of the fight, who met their ends through methods unimaginable in earlier forms of battle. These troops fell victim to armaments that acted with a near sentient awareness, locating them no matter their place of concealment. On the other side, those in American factories who built these devices bore their own sacrifices. For the sake of national security, incidents in factories were kept under wraps. Employees at places like Crossley Corporation, Emerson Radio, and various other sites endured mental collapses due to overwhelming strain and fatigue. These individuals assembled armaments of extraordinary deadliness, all while remaining ignorant of the true nature of their output, and they bore the weight of that secrecy in compelled quietude. Still, the ethical arithmetic of warfare remains profoundly intricate. In the Battle of the Bulge, 19,000 American soldiers lost their lives. Absent the proximity fuses, what additional toll in fatalities might have occurred? By how much more time could the conflict have dragged on? In the midst of prolonged fighting, how many additional victims of the Holocaust might have succumbed? Each day that the war was curtailed could have spared thousands more souls in concentration camps, holding out for their eventual rescue. Technological legacy. The initiative behind the proximity fuse sparked innovations that reshaped technology in the years following the war. Those compact vacuum tubes laid the groundwork for the electronics of today. Procedures for quality assurance developed during the manufacturing of proximity fuses set benchmarks that shaped standards across industries. Techniques for orchestrating the efforts of numerous suppliers laid the groundwork for contemporary approaches to supply chain coordination. Drawing on his skills in component miniaturization, Dr. James Van Allen contributed to the design of instruments for satellites, which paved the way for his eventual identification of the radiation belts surrounding Earth. Principles underlying radar technology advanced into the sophisticated systems used today. The idea of self-reliant sensors capable of independent judgments formed the basis for the development of guided missiles and, in time, the full spectrum of intelligent armaments. All modern precision-guided munitions trace their origins back to the proximity fuse, marking it as the pioneering device that detected its surroundings and determined the optimal moment for explosion. The transformative changes that originated in the Ardennes persist today on contemporary fields of combat, where advanced weaponry holds sway over military engagements. Final reckoning. The Battle of the Bulge concluded on January 25, 1945, as German troops withdrew completely. The final push, ordered by Hitler, inflicted around 100,000 losses on German forces, yet yielded no gains whatsoever. On the American side, the toll reached 75,000 casualties, with 19,000 lives lost. Beyond serving as a mere tool of combat, the proximity fuse had established itself as a decisive factor in victory. Eisenhower's judgment that if the Germans had controlled such fuses, the Normandy landings on D-Day could have turned into an extraordinarily challenging endeavor, or even a failure, highlights their pivotal role in strategy. Far from being a simple enhancement to artillery, these devices represented a groundbreaking advancement, one that reshaped the fundamental equations of battle. Those German troops confronting barrages from proximity-fused rounds encountered a novel horror. Shells that acted with eerie precision, pursuing targets relentlessly no matter where they hid, and turning the sky itself into a lethal environment. What they endured signaled the shift of combat into an era dominated by technology. Starting with Colonel Axelson's unapproved initial deployment on December 16, 1944, and extending to the widespread firing of 200,000 such rounds throughout the Ardennes region, the proximity fuse illustrated how breakthroughs in science could deliver a game-changing edge on the battlefield. This fusion of U.S. manufacturing prowess, intellectual brilliance, and flexible battlefield strategies produced an instrument of war that played a crucial part in sealing the conflict's result. The tale of the proximity fuse ultimately revolves around profound shifts, technological, strategic, and profoundly human. It demonstrated how a system of industrial democracy might forge armaments of unparalleled destructive power, how ingenuity could surmount overwhelming odds in numbers, and how the faction armed with advanced scientific knowledge stood the best chance of victory. Such insights influenced not only the closing chapters of World War II, but also the fundamental framework of conflict that emerged in its wake. Amid the icy woodlands of the Ardennes, the era of warfare dominated by technology truly dawned. Small radar devices embedded in cannon projectiles redefined the grim calculus of mortality, irrevocably altering the ways in which humanity conducts its battles. Those German troops who perished under the detonations of proximity-triggered aerial explosions fell victim not merely to the fortunes of a single engagement, but to an upheaval in the realm of armed conflict, one whose echoes still mold the contours of our modern existence.